Perfect. So, hello, you're all very welcome. We're here today to preview the semi-finals of the URC. I'm joined by former Leinster and Ireland international Gordon Darcy and sports writer with the Irish Times, John O'Sullivan. How are you doing, lads? John, you're hot off the plane, straight from La Rochelle to join us here.
Yeah. Started leaving La Rochelle with regrets this morning. So yeah, got to spend 3 days down there. It was good catching up with they've a pretty well-known head coach. So I spent a little bit of time with him and his family down there. So he was a very good, generous host and good crack as well. So yeah, it was nice to catch up with him. I hadn't seen him for a good while actually. So it was good, yeah. And you can read it all on Saturday week in the Irish Times.
So you won't give too much away. I'm sure he's licking his lips ahead of next weekend. Gordon, how are things with you?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm taking a break from trampolining with my kids.
Lovely.
Glad you said with your kids.
Yeah, well, the last time I was on one, I did a grade 2 in my medial, the first time I've ever injured my knee in my life.
Oh my God.
So yeah, no, I'm quite happy to be ducking up here. Hope you're not bringing any of Rog's conspiracy theories back with you on that plane.
I've loads of them.
Jason, Tracy, planting
Tracy,
stories on off the ball.
I heard about it rather than heard it. Yeah, I heard about it.
I suppose we'll start by looking back at last weekend. It was such a busy weekend of rugby. We have the AIL finals. We'll touch on them later on, but the quarterfinals of the URC. If we start with Friday night, I was in Belfast and it was a great game. I suppose not many people expected it. It was billed as Ulster's to lose, and Connacht went out there and in a way, Connacht would have been kicking themselves had they lost that game because they were by far the better team on the night, and they really should have won by more, Gordon.
Yeah, it was. Well, I think one of the challenges, and we'll probably talk about this in probably a bit more depth, is like their inability to turn pressure into points. Like they had all the possession, all the territory, but every time they got just the white line, they just couldn't get over. They couldn't score points, and as the game went on, you kind of thought, well, geez, Ulster, all they really need to do is to score one try here and they'll probably seal the game. And they just never managed to get that. Mm. And Connacht were just really frustratingly good. But you do have to wonder what was going on in the Ulster side of things. The preparation, like the way they played, they just weren't really there. They weren't at the races.
Do you think it was the pressure that got to them, John? Because Ulster were looking at a home semi-final against the Stormers had they won that game. And at this point, it's probably fair to say that they've taken a step back again this year.
Yeah, I think it was pretty scratchy and disjointed is how I'd kind of describe the performance. And I think they weren't mentally attuned to the task in hand. And I'm looking at, Connacht didn't take their chances. And if you look at it, it was the final decision, the final pass. So not giving the ball to Quellen Blade and support, kind of Bundy grassing a pass, 3 meters from the line, that sort of stuff. And either one of those tries are scored and they're winning comfortably. But Ulster looked just out of sorts. They didn't look, there was no cohesion. They were very disjointed, kind of sloppy in what they were doing. And they never really, until the game looked like it was drifting out of sight, there was no urgency and they were very inaccurate in what they were doing. And I think there was just a flat performance. And I don't understand playing at home in front of their home crowd. And you give huge credit to Connacht for the way they kind of put it up to them. But you would have thought that Ulster might have found an answer or might have found more cohesion in what they were doing, but they didn't. It was a really poor performance for 65 minutes, while at the same time acknowledging how well Connacht played and how they stuck it to Ulster physically and they kept playing and would have been worthy of a greater gap on the scoreboard at the end.
And they were just so clinical at the breakdown, Gordon, and I think they had 10 turnovers throughout the whole game. But as you said, they didn't finish a lot of the chances that they had. But Ulster, the only spark of life was when Robert Balogun got the ball in his hand, but the ball wasn't getting to him enough.
You're going to give John a what you call it? Zach is always talking about why you would have probably a Rolls Royce or Ferrari of a player like that, and you only give them the ball once in a game. Once or
yes,
twice.
I would.
It's always been every time he gets the ball, he does something.
He looked so dangerous every time he got the ball, and you could really hear the crowd getting behind him, but they weren't getting the ball as far as him.
It's sometimes, and it's not funny, but it almost looks like they're trying not to get him the ball. He touches it that little. Like, if he was playing, he's playing in any of the other provinces, he would probably be, he'd be well into 15, maybe 20 tries in the season. It's just, it's really bizarre. But the thing, just what John was talking there as well, I'd be really interested in what you think as well, Archers. What was the atmosphere like there? Because when they scored that try, it almost backfired on them. They almost kind of went, oh, well, we have it now, and they kind of checked out even further from it. Because I was up there for the Bulls match, and geez, they made it really before the Champions Cup, and it was really hard work. Watching them play, they really were not there.
Connacht had a great contingent of supporters up there, and you could really hear them. And on the 60-minute mark, when Alan O'Connor got over, you thought, okay, Ulster would be able to kind of build on that and kick on from there. But it was Connacht's voice that you heard coming from the crowd, and they kind of rallied, and the defensive effort again at the end from Connacht to keep Ulster out. It was the Connacht contingent that you could hear backing their team. And yeah, it was strange. It was strange. Ulster were penalised 18 times, and every time that happened, you could hear the sigh in the crowd. And I don't know, it just, things aren't clicking for them. And there are rumours going around that it isn't a happy camp, and we don't know the ins and outs, but something isn't right, because they have quality players, but they don't seem to be gelling.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for supporters to get involved when their team is that disconnect. There was a disconnect between the supporters and the team. You could see that there was a sense of frustration, possibly in the stands, and that allowed the Connacht supporters' voice to be heard. Also, their team is playing much better rugby, so Ulster supporters are kind of fretful. They're frustrated at times. You can hear them giving out, with some of the decisions, particularly those of the breakdown. And it was just, it was very rare that the team produced the sort of rugby that allowed them to get into the match and create an atmosphere. So what Connacht did brilliantly was they took all the sting or all the atmosphere out from, that would have been there if Ulster had been playing well, and the home supporters weren't really a factor in the game. If anything, the team probably sensed the frustration in the stands.
But isn't that then a like the way, like I was trying to count up or look for that stat of how many turnovers they conceded and penalties. 18 penalties is like, they are not a team that commits 18 penalties in a game. So there's a disjoint there between either, and they were so frustrated with the ref, but it wasn't too many contentious decisions at the breakdown. Maybe one or two, but like 1 or 2 out of 18 is, not that much. So you could see they were all moving at different tempos on the pitch. And this doesn't take anything away from Connacht. Like, Connacht, should have been home and hosed. They should have scored 4 tries.
Yeah.
They had their issues, but like Connacht, the Ulster's indiscipline was like, it was bizarre. And the talk back to the ref and everything, like everybody just seemed to be working completely independent of each other. And that kind of brought Connacht back into it. They opened the door, and Connacht were good enough to kind of ram it home to them. But yeah, but for those penalties and for the frustration, for individuals kind of looking at other people, body language was massive. And I think in that game for them, is definitely more to that. It's not a happy camp, but it's not a settled. It's not settled. Like, that message, the way they were playing, you'd be fit to be tied.
Yeah. And I suppose Connacht now, they had nothing to lose going to Belfast, and it'll be the same attitude going to Cape Town against the Stormers. And if you look at how Connacht won in Belfast, we spoke about how clinical they were at the breakdown, but Stormers themselves are such a physical side, and that was one of the areas where they really targeted the Bulls last weekend, John.
Yeah, I think it's really important for Connacht not to go with the kind of attitude that they have when I say nothing to lose, that they've produced a performance to get themselves here in the competition, and they owe it to themselves, nobody else. They owe it to themselves and their supporters to go and produce another hard-nosed performance. That is a testament to a good side, and Connacht are a good side, and they need to back it up. It's not good enough to go down to do all they did in Belfast, which was fantastic, and then go down and just go, well, we did really well to get where we are. You know, they're good enough to go down there and cause the Stormers problems, and that has to be the attitude. They need to try and back it up. They have the wherewithal to do it. Yes, it'll be a huge physical challenge for them. Yes, it'll be difficult at the breakdown. Yes, they'll have to be they will have to have the courage to play in the right places, that they won't be able to get into an arm wrestle up front. But if they show the same determination, accuracy, and quality at the breakdown, they can cause the Stormers problems. The flip side of that is they have to take their chances. If they don't take their chances, they've got to take everything. I mean, you're talking 90% of what's coming their way or whatever they create, be it penalties or tries, they must take it.
Absolutely, like they would be kicking themselves some of the chances they left behind last weekend. And one thing that will stand to Connacht is, I don't know how, when you saw the picture of Mac Hansen's head, his brains during the week, but they have such a settled side going. They have the same team chosen again, Gordon, and that'll stand to them. They have that momentum.
Yeah, they do. You kind of like, and I think this will be relevant to when we're talking about the Champions Cup next week. I think you have to play your best. Every game you play, you have to play better the following week. Now, no, Connacht didn't score, but they were underdogs going to Ulster, and they came away with that win, and it was just about enough to get over the line. I just wonder how much emotional energy was spent in that win, and they're traveling down to play the Stormers, and again looked at the game that they played, and like obviously, you know, the champions, and they have the title, but they have the reputation of that big physical team. Evan Roos in number 8, kind of big annoying number 8, who kind of reflective of their pack, but the quality in their back line, like when you look at the threats from Wilmse and Slibok and Jantes, and my pronunciation is going to get worse before it gets better. Players like that, like, they were majestic last week. And if you compare that to, say, the impact, say, Cooney, Burns and Lowry had, these guys are going to cause Connacht an awful lot more trouble than Ulster did last week, and they're having to sit in a flight for 10 hours to go down for the pleasure of it. So I'm kind of like, when I looked at the Stormers, the match against the Bulls, they are very, very impressive team.
And Manny Libak, you mentioned him there. Their discipline has to be so good, because he is so accurate and clinical with his kicking boot.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I just have a sneaking suspicion that Connacht understand, with Andy Friend moving on, with other players moving on, with the group, this final opportunity for a group of players together. When I say there's no pressure on them, the only pressure that they have on them is the pressure they put on themselves to perform. And I think it's all about what they do. If it's not good enough to win, that's fair enough. But I think for Connacht, the most important thing is to focus on being the best version of themselves that they can be down there. And that is to have the courage to play. And yes, you're absolutely right. They need to get a break, an even break in terms of the refereeing and the penalty count and stuff like that. If they can get after the Stormers ball, they need to be clever at the breakdown. They need to know when to go for it and when to take a step back. They need to no self-inflicted wounds. So don't give up too many penalties. Play in the right areas. But sometimes it'll be on for them to go from deep, and they have to take those chances. I think it is, yes, if you're looking, I don't know what the bookmakers have it. Obviously, the Stormers are favourites. They're the defending champions. They're playing at home. They've got real quality throughout the team, and power as well, power and pace. But I think from an Irish perspective and from a Connacht perspective, I think it's all about what they bring to the game. And I would love to see them go down and just play to their capacity and see where that takes them in the game.
Munster beat them
Yeah, they were the only team to beat them at home this season. Would they have seen anything from how Munster beat them? Can they take anything from that performance?
Well, I think there's something in the South African psyche, like a little bit in it, where they kind of always assume they do believe they're going to win, and sometimes I think Munster got pumped by whoever it was, 2 weeks before, was the Sharks in Europe. They probably just kind of went, this is who it is, and there's no way these guys are going to show up. And Munster showed up physically, and took their opportunities, and Stormers couldn't find a way to get back into the game. So there is definitely a bit of truth in that, John, in that if Connacht show up and Stormers are slightly off and they create a few opportunities and they score them, they have definitely have the wherewithal and the ability in that, because they play that type of game, to keep stressing them. If they don't, I would think it could be a tough day for them.
Yeah, I think there's what they need to do is Connacht need to ensure that there's a pretty high tempo in the game. They don't need it to go stop-start affair, because that will suit the Stormers to a degree. They'll use their power game. You got to be careful where you give them access in terms of set piece and stuff like that. So Connacht have to be smart. They have to be accurate. And they really do have to believe. I think that's the key as well. You have to. It's one thing thinking that you might be able to win or hoping you might win. You have to go out in the pitch and believe that you can win.
But
what chance would you give them, John?
I would give Connacht. I think if I've read the room correctly from a distance, I'm not reading the room as such in that respect, but I think that if they can go well for the first 20 minutes, I think that will infuse some belief, and I think they can take it from there, and they can go very close. I think if they start poorly, then I think they're in trouble. Or if they don't have the courage to play, I think they'll be in trouble. I think if they do have the courage to play, then anything is possible.
You're leaning towards Stormers, Gordon?
I am, because the one thing, and I've been probably critical of Connacht, the bit that they miss in their game is a really, really good kicking strategy and their ability to kick. So you see the way teams kick now, the 50-22s, but the way teams look to, so the kick, what's the best way of describing it? They're kicking to get the ball back. So you see teams, they kick down the middle of the pitch and they're looking to get grass in the 22, and then the other team kick it back, and everybody is trying to find grass, and eventually somebody kicks it out. Some teams are much better at that. Like Ross Byrne is excellent at that for Leinster. The South African teams are excellent at it as well. That where you're always looking for that length and then finding grass, the kick chase comes up, they're not able to counterattack, and then they have to kick it out. But I don't think they've been consistently able to do that in big games, and their kicking has always let them down. And I think this is a game where I think it's going to be more of the same, unfortunately. And I think they'll be kicking when the Stormers want them to kick rather than when they want to. So unfortunately, I think this is I think they had a brilliant win last week. They've got the Champions Cup. I think the Stormers will be big bullies.
I will see how that one plays out. Looking back quickly on Glasgow Munster before we focus on the semi-final, the big one, Munster and Leinster. I suppose it was a funny game in a way, because it was determined in one way, even though Munster fans mightn't agree, by the red card, but it did kind of change the dynamic of the game. And I suppose we saw with Toulouse, the yellow cards, the bearing that had on the game as well. But full credit to Munster, they were able to take advantage, and they were the first team to win in Scotstoun all season, and the first team to win there, I think, in 17 months. So they were left wounded, very wounded after the game. But we'll look further into the team shortly. But just briefly, John, what did you take from that performance that Munster gave in Scotstoun?
I thought it was a brilliant performance in some respects, considering the injuries, the 4 HIAs, and the injuries to Peter O'Mahony and to Dermot Byrne as well during the game. I thought they showed in the past, you would kind of say that hard nosed quality that they bring to it, but there was a huge element to that as well. But there was more to it than that. It wasn't just gritty. They basically they depowered Glasgow, and they made Glasgow, who would have been pretty confident going into the game, and they basically took that away from them, and they kept it up, and they were relentless, and they didn't buckle when they got those injuries. And yes, there's no doubt that the red card had a huge influence on the outcome of the game, or certainly it made it slightly, I don't want to use the term easier, because there was nothing easy about what Munster did, but it certainly helped a little bit in terms of shaping the game. And I was very impressed. I thought Munster deserve a lot of credit. They deserve every credit for it. I thought Glasgow were really poor. If I was a Glasgow supporter, you'd be looking at that performance and you'd be wondering about the team. I don't know where it came from. As you rightly pointed out, they've been unbeatable at home, and they've played some great rugby, and all that kind of disappeared or came apart or unraveled on the night. And it was hard to figure that Glasgow were the team. All that Glasgow had achieved going into the game, they were unrecognisable on the night. And you have to give Munster huge credit. I thought it was an excellent performance. Very, very good.
Dennis Leamy's getting a lot of plaudits after the game, Gordon, and their defence was excellent throughout the game. And I suppose looking at their defence throughout the whole season, it has been so good at times, but it has been very porous at other times. Then we saw against Scarlets and Glasgow at home, and the Sharks away, they can leak tries very easily, but when it clicks, it's very hard to break them down.
Yeah, and Leams has been brilliant, hasn't he? And Graham Rowntree kind of is going on record and saying how much he, how much the players really buy into what he's trying to do. And yeah, and I think what's really interesting is when there's been a shake or a wobble with Munster, where there has been loads of times this season, they go back to what they can fix almost instantly, which is their defense and which is the physical side of the game, and they've been really good at regenerating that way this season, because where you see other teams where things just, slowly but surely start falling apart, and they never really recover. Munster have been really good at regenerating when there has been, a big loss or something happens, and it's been a couple of times this season. So they've been really good. I think Leamy has been really important for that. And I wonder how much. No, we know how much they're putting a huge amount of focus onto that. So Glasgow were really, really poor. I just wonder how much of that was down to the tactics that Munster put out, their ability to frustrate and to slow down the opposition ball. And I think they've been they've been just really, really good at that. And Leamy, I think I'm delighted for him as well, because he came back from Leinster, and everything had done well up in Leinster, and I suppose he would have had high expectations of it, and in that role, he's done brilliant, and that will be a key. They'll take an awful lot of energy from that for Leinster this week. There'll be an awful lot of going, that's what we do, but it has to be better.
And we saw the development again in their attack. Fekitoa's try against Glasgow, John, was another example of how rejuvenated their attack has become under Mike Prendergast.
Yeah, very much so. I think he is a huge loss for Munster tomorrow. I think over the last month and a half, 5 matches or so, he's come into his own. He's shown the quality of the player that was an All Black in the past. I think that what Munster fans are kind of they'll look back and they'll say what a pity he's going to Benetton, obviously, for next season.
And himself and Frisch have really been clicking well together.
They have. They're a very good foil for one another, and I think that he will be a big loss, because he's been a catalyst for, both of them have, but Fekitoa has got Munster over the game line. His footwork is very good. His awareness of what's going on around him has been very good, and he's finally shown the qualities that like I say, made him the player that he was prior to arriving at Munster. I thought that as well, that John Klein has had a brilliant season for Munster. Yeah. I mean, you look at players that have made a difference, and he has made a difference. He's consistently excellent all season. I think he's very close to their player of the year. Fineen Wycherley, if we go back to say, look at the difference between Ulster and Munster, Munster's big players turned up. to make up for the fact that they were losing players on a regular basis through injury. So players stood up and were counted for Munster in difficult circumstances. And that's something that has been part of their DNA forever, basically. Just in adversity, they find those players stand up and were counted, and that's what they did in Scottstown, and they were able to do it for long enough to win the game, albeit with Glasgow producing probably their worst performance or close to their worst performance of the season.
Yeah, and you mentioned John Klein there, and his skill set, I think, is one of the things that has really improved since he came to Munster. He said it himself. It wasn't his way of playing. He was a kind of a crash ball kind of player before he came to Munster. This is something he had to learn, but he's obviously worked really hard at it, and he's reaping the rewards now.
He's a big man, so if he can stay upright in contact and get his hands free, he can do damage, and that's the thing that he's done. You're right. He's added to his game, so all the things that he used to do, he can still do those. He's doing them a little bit better, or maybe with a higher profile than he did in the past, but he has added to his game. And you have to give credit to the coaching team working on the skill sets of not just him, other players as well. And as Gordon said, like the work of Dennis Leamy in defence, what they say, defence is an attitude. And certainly Munster's attitude on the night was first class.
The only thing John Klein, I think, sometimes you can get. I think it's lovely that he's developed his game. His ability to smash and clean rucks. That's what he's paid for, and he does that. He is doing that better than almost anybody in. Obviously, I'm paying him a massive disservice, but the value he gives Munster with his ability and timing at rucks is unbelievable. And Craig Casey needs to feed off that at the weekend. So Casey has, he's coming in this. He wouldn't have been starting if Murray was fit, because Murray's come back.
He's been playing really well.
Yeah, he's been playing brilliantly. It's like he's been free. The shackles have come off Sean Klein in there. Very similar to James Ryan in Leinster. His accuracy at rucks, and that's a thing in the modern game. We know how much yellow and red cards play on the result. If Munster give Leinster a yellow card tomorrow or a red card tomorrow, in the match, they're just going to blow it away. They will blow you. We know how good they are. If the discipline is good, but having players like John Klein in there, that if they get over the gain line, his timing, his accuracy at rucks, and can get Craig Casey on the front foot ball, get Munster on the front foot ball, that is massive. That will be more of a value add than anything else he does in the game. And Munster are going to have to rely on him massively. But it's a very dangerous second row pairing now with him and Ty Byrne. He's been out for God knows how long and back with a bang and was flying it last week.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on again to the Leinster-Munster game, we'll touch on Leinster's performance against the Sharks. It was just a routine win, I suppose, from Leinster's point of view. They never looked like they were threatened by the Sharks, John.
No, when the game was the game was a contest very briefly, and then the cards came in, and while the Sharks were numbers down, Leinster went and won the match. I don't think it was their most convincing performance of the season. I don't think that they played as well as they would want to play, but they certainly did more than enough to win the game and win it pretty comfortably in the end. I mean, there was very little stress. If you were a Leinster supporter watching that match, I don't think you'd have had too much stress. If you were a Sharks supporter, you might have been a bit unhappy that they were kind of a little bit loose and a little bit ill-disciplined, and they didn't give themselves a chance really in the match.
Yeah, they scored 3 tries during the yellow card periods. And I suppose, as John said, Gordon, they weren't playing at their best, but it's what Leinster do. They still find a way to win when they aren't playing at their best. Yeah,
and if you just go back to, Rogers' post-match against Exeter, the chat-ins there going like, this is a tricky month for Leinster. It is a tricky month for Leinster. Like, it's straight into knockouts, and that shadow of La Rochelle is cast over all of Leinster's these last week's game and this week's game. The rotating players, and Leinster played like a team that has been heavily rotated. They were a little bit sluggish at the breakdown. Luke McGrath's not Jemison Gibson Park. And the tempo isn't there when he plays at a different tempo to Gibson Park. In the back three, we looked a little bit shaky, and we looked a little bit as in the defensively a little bit out of tune in the when the game was a contest. And we just looked a little bit, like a team that was heavily rotated. But I think there's enough individual talent there. There was enough individual talent there for Leinster to win the game, and just to do enough. And enough players got some game time, and got out. There didn't no real material injuries or anything from it. So they kind of have done enough, and I suppose that's their focus this week as well, isn't it? They just want the results. They don't really care about how they pretty, because they're trying to compete on two fronts. And the days of the URC being, a walkthrough, it might be a canter for Leinster during the regular season. Once you get to the knockout stuff, one bad performance and you're gone. And Munster are going to be hyper aware of that.
Mm-hmm. If we look at the teams that are starting for both sides tomorrow, so I suppose, as I said earlier, Munster were like the walking wounded after the win in Glasgow, but they've named a much stronger team than expected.
Yeah, I think that not too many people have anticipated that Keith Earls would have recovered, which is a huge boost for them if he's fit and firing. I think the big thing for me is this continuing enforced it's not an experiment, enforced if you like, selection, with moving Jack Crowley into 12 and with Ben Healy at 10. Gordon can talk about this in more detail because he understands it better playing an inside centre, but every time there's had to be an accommodation this year, Jack Crowley is the one that has moved. And I think it'll be difficult for him tomorrow because he's coming up against Charlie Natai, and he's physically strong, very good ball playing centre, inside centre, who can play out of the tackle. And it's a big ask from Jack Crowley. So he's going to have to his defence is going to have to be very good. And I'm not sure that if Munster wanted to play the way I'm interested to see what way Munster play, because Ben Healy plays slightly deeper, whether he plays flatter and they continue to play the way they do when Jack Crowley is 10, or whether it's more of a kicking orientated game, I think will be interesting to see. But that for me was when I was looking at the back line, that is the decision to have Ben Healy at 10 and Jack Crowley at 12. Will be interesting to see how that works out.
What do you think the thinking behind it is, Gordon?
Well, the only like they are fairly threadbare. When you look at, say, Leinster were probably thin on the ground last week. They look in rude health and well stocked this week. The only other option was Scannell to come in and start and to leave Crowley at 10. It's not that I'm not convinced by Crowley at 10. I am not convinced of his ability to manage a game at 10. And I wonder how much that fed into it. And they kind of went, I think by Healy starting, it means you're going to be kicking. And you're going to be using his really long. And it's nothing, there's no, it's not, you don't apologize for that. He is going to kick, and they're going to chase. They're going to look to put pressure and disrupt Leinster and win the kicking duel and win the territory, and hopefully as a result of that, the possession thing basis. Because having to accommodate Crowley into there means he's not nailed on as their number 110 either. So I don't think they're as decided as to who their number 110 is this season. Now it's obviously going to be made a lot easier for them next season with Healy moving on. But if your 10 is the most important position, and arguably this week with Conor Murray being out, it is the most important position, they haven't gone for Crowley, and I think that is important as well.
I think it's a fair point that you make about the kicking game, because Leinster's back three will have to be pretty smart and pretty aware. With Ben Healy's boot, if you're out of position and given how far he can kick it and how accurate he is, 50-22s will be on if you're not in the right place and you don't cover the ground well enough. And I think that's something that Munster may look to to try and kind of tempt Leinster forward or try and pull them out of position a little bit,
Leinster's
and then find the space.
Leinster's utility knife or utility tool. Jimmy O'Brien will have, and it's a good, and I think it's a good test for him as well. You know, he is a jack of all trades, and you know, I think we disagree on this a bit, John. That I think he can be a everywhere from 13 out, but he's done on that 13. He's popped in. He's gone in on the wing. He's done well. 15 is big. There's a big expectation with when you play in the Leinster 15 jersey at the moment, because the way Hugo Keenan covers grass is just phenomenal. I think his ability to cover that backfield, it's one of those things that he does it so well, you almost take it for granted. But like, he covers so much ground, and Jimmy will be under a lot of pressure to not give that backfield, or the whole back three, you're right, will be under pressure to not give green fields to Ben Healy.
Anytime Keenan, if he dropped a ball, everyone was just so shocked because it just doesn't happen. You know, he's just so reliable.
Yeah, no, I was, yeah, he is, and I suppose that's the standard. I mean, you don't want they talk about standards, not letting them drop and all that. I think it is a big game for the back three. In fairness, it's not just Jimmy O'Brien's responsibility; it's Tommy O'Brien and Dave Carney's as well. So when you haven't played together that often as a unit, that understanding. So I would imagine Jimmy O'Brien will have to do a lot of talking to his wings about where he wants them on the pitch, and that organisation and that discussion will be very important, because if you play together as a back three a lot, you have that understanding and you require less verbal communication. You kind of know each other's game, and you're a little bit more in sync. So this will be interesting to see how the three boys go.
Leinster have a lot of frontliners missing, but they still really have a strong core group. You know, looking at the pack, you still have Ryan Baird, Jenkins, Conan. So they still have those players that can really stand up, and I suppose they still have that leadership throughout the team.
Yeah, I think that the two packs are well matched. I think Munster have a very, again, when I mentioned John Klein as potentially Munster's one, or certainly one of the players of the year, you know, John Hodnett is another for me. I think he's been superb whenever he's got opportunities this season for Munster. He's been consistently excellent in his games. And I think Munster will kind of, it'll be an interesting matchup. You're right in the sense that Leinster have that balance of young talent and experience. You look at Jack Conan and Max Deegan in the back row, and Will Connors coming back in. People forget that Will Connors took the jersey from Josh van der Fleer, and you saw the level that Josh van der Fleer went to get it back, basically, and ended up as World Player of the Year. And he would make reference to the fact that Will Connors kind of inspired him to be better, because he had to be if he wanted to get a blue jersey or a green jersey, green number 7 jersey. So I think, it promises to be very intriguing, I would say. It'll be interesting to see how the scrummage goes. Obviously, the Sharks put a bit of heat on the Leinster scrum, and I'm sure Munster will have noted that, and they'll want to see what they can do. It'll be interesting to see how Ronan Kelleher goes in terms of coming back after injury, after shoulder injury again. And yeah, there promises to be some very interesting matchups, both in terms of the breakdown as well, where Munster have a very strong presence.
I suppose Leo Cullen isn't taking anything for granted, Gordon. They're very aware of what happened at this time last year in the competition when the Bulls came to Dublin. And it was a really tight affair when they played in Thomond Park. How do you see it playing out? Like, I suppose when you look at the rivalry between these two sides over the past few years, it has been dominated by Leinster, but there still seems to be a real edge to this fixture.
Yeah, there has, it's back, it's an edge now, because for a rivalry you need two teams to be in it. And really, under Johan van Graan, I don't think Munster were really in that. I think there was maybe one, I think there was that Christmas match in 2019, I think, where there was a red card. Do you remember,
was that the one James Lowe was
sent off? James Lowe got the red card. Like, it was just but they just dragged them into the gutter. It wasn't anything that you would kind of go, oh, there's a strong foundation we can go on. Once they're like, you look at the progress they've made in the 12 months since, you know, Wig has come in as the head coach, and what they have been capable of. So they are definitely back as a team. And John's already talked about that DNA, that Munster that they have in there. It's so simple for them in that stopping Leinster's primary possession, disrupting that, and they have a pack. They have a tight five that can definitely go toe to toe with this Leinster pack. It is a little bit light, as John has said, and you know, Ryan Baird will have spent an awful lot of this week looking at his scrummaging. You know, up how he needs to be able to do both sides of the ball. Him and Max Deegan, both sides of the ball. It's not just the fun stuff. They need to go, because Michael Milne had a terrible day at the office last week.
Yeah.
And if you give that kind of access to Munster, yeah, you win penalties, but you also win the emotional and the momentum battle in games. And that can be
and territory, quite simply. You get free access to your opponent's 22, or you get free access certainly into within 30 meters of their line most of the time.
And I think that's really interesting. That's one of the, I think scrummaging, Peter Coyle and Paul Wallace will both be delighted with it, that scrummaging will be a tactical battle in this match. And if Munster can get a foothold there, that could go an awful long way to disrupting how Leinster play. And do they go after them in the lineouts? How they go, like, it's surreal, because you have to, Leinster are that good that even though they have rotated and there's enough, and they picked some senior players in there, it is still, again, a heavily rotated team that does not have an awful lot of partnerships in there. It is a reasonably settled Munster team. They're coming in to do exactly what they did in Glasgow: frustrate, destroy, try and break down it, and try and drag Leinster into a game that they don't want to play. Because Leinster get off the top, clean ball on the line out, they get over the ball. You're looking at Natai and Robbie Henshaw going up against, they'll be pummeling down that 10-12 channel. As they get over the gain line, that will be hard for Munster to come back from that.
I would also say that never underestimate, and Gordon, you might be able to touch on this, never underestimate when you're challenging somebody for a place in an Irish squad and you go head to head in a provincial rivalry. So if you look at the likes of Gavin Coombs looking at Jack Conan, if you look at Ryan Baird looking at Tadhg Byrne, if you look at Harry Byrne and Jack Crowley as two of the young out halves who are kind of chasing the same things. If you're Anton Frisch and you're up against Robbie Henshaw, you get a chance to lay down a marker. This is this is an individual context within a match. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it passes anybody by that, you know, you have an opportunity here.
Yeah, you mentioned Harry Byrne there. Is he, I suppose he hasn't had that much game time, but there's a lot of talk of his potential. Do you see him living up to that potential and all this talk about him, Gordon?
So I really like Harry, and I think he's the most creative player in Ireland at the moment. And
that's a huge statement.
Yeah, I genuinely think he is, but I think he's the whole package. I think he overplays, definitely overplays, but his ability to manage games and his ability to pick passes, I think, is top quality. Now, you can obviously, somebody can easily come in and say Prendergast. He's played what, 80 minutes or, you know, thing. He's not in the conversation at the moment. I think he's a more rounded player than Crowley, and he has a massive opportunity tomorrow in a big game that matters. And this is probably his first knockout game, is it?
I'm not 100% sure, but I kind of fight Jack Crowley's corner a little bit here. I do think that they both have good skill sets. I think they both have to prove that they can manage a high-profile game. They both have to and this is unfortunately for Jack Crowley, he's playing in the centre. Fortunately for Harry Byrne, he gets an opportunity now to lead his team and to lead his team around the pitch. And nobody doubts Harry's ability. nobody doubts the fact that he can, at his best, is a very, very good footballer. He has got to stay injury free. He's got to get a run of games, and this is a huge opportunity for him. It really is. It's a chance for him to kind of make a statement, one way or the other.
With an Irish hat on, it's a bit disappointing we're not seeing them going head to head, because everything you said about those individual markups would have been brilliant. So instead, actually, we're going to see Crowley having to do, taking tip-on passes, running into brick walls, or going in as the second receiver and trying to create something, which he's brilliant at. And I think he's until he plays one of those big matches and comes and has that completely consummate performance, that he just strikes me as a brilliant footballer. But maybe 10 isn't his best position. He's one of those guys you want on the field, but is he the guy you trust to manage a game?
Okay, and is Healy that guy tomorrow?
I think Munster will hope he is. Yeah, he can do. It depends what way Munster want to play. And in fairness to Ben Healy, I mean, he does get pigeonholed a little bit when he plays deeper, and he's got a great kicking game. He's a very good place kicker, and he's got a big boot and all that sort of stuff. He can play. It's a bit like the Harry Byrne and Jack Crowley. This is a match. He had opportunities when he got that run of games, and he's moving on at the end of the season. But I think for himself, he would like to prove that he has the qualities. I mean, this is a good opportunity to remind people of the quality that he has, and also to kind of say to people, well, I was pigeonholed in the past, but actually I'm a better, more rounded player than people give me credit for. But he has to prove it, and this is an opportunity for him to do that.
I wonder, is Gregor Townsend? Are we seeing any input from Gregor Townsend in
very good point.
His overall play? Because that is exactly, like, I was kind of thinking about him, and it's very frustrating to play out somebody who stands deep and then carries the ball from deep. It's really hard, but it's very easy to defend as well on the other side. So I think this is his first start. So it will be really interesting to see how his depth off the gain line will be, because Leinster will have prepared, I suppose, in one sense or one fashion for him. But if he gets that carrying the ball, moving with it, and that's the fine art, and nobody's better at it than Johnny Sexton. His ability to take the ball moving and still release it in 2 or 3 steps. It's it's such a simple skill, but it's really, really hard to do, and not too many people do it, and do it well.
So Munster's progression this season, it's been huge. They believe they can win in Dublin. Where will they beat Leinster, and how will this game play out? Or is it Leinster's to lose again?
I'll leave you to take that one, Gordon. I would say that how can they win? They can win by dominating the ball. They can win by being accurate in what they do. They can win by putting the Leinster set piece under pressure and slowing down their breakdown ball. And they can win by using the ball intelligently and squeeze them.
Munster are coming with the knowledge they can win. And I think there's a big difference between believing and knowing you can win and being there that you can win. I think it's the first time they're kind of going, well, actually, we've got enough in here with the team Leinster put out, with where we're coming from, what we're doing. And you don't apologize for that. Leinster are not putting out their strongest team, because they have 1.5 eyes on next week. This is the team they think can do a job, and that, if that's plays into Munster's hands, why would you apologize for that? They have to start fast. So I think what was it? Will Carling was often talked about. He would know when he said he was captain in England. He said nothing to do with the build up of the week. He said he knew in the first 5 or 6 minutes were we going to win that game or not. And I think that we'll know very, very quickly, have Munster showed up. Is Gavin Coombs going to outperform? Is John Klein is Tyke Byrne there? Is Peter O'Mahony fit? You know, is Antoine Frisch going to try and get one over on All Black and Robbie Henshaw? Is Jack Crowley, you know, going to swap? Craig Casey, is he going to get outplayed by Luke McGrath? Do all these players show up and do they perform? And we'll know that, I think, in the first 6 or 7 minutes, whether they are doing enough to turn that we can win into actually actionable stuff on the field, which John talked about, stopping their primary possession, any advantage they have, driving it home in the scrum that they might have at the breakdown, the defense that's been so good for them all season, building that, winning the territory, winning all those things. There's so many things there that they can do, but they actually have to show up and do it. I think with that opening 10 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes, we will have a really, really good idea where Munster are. And if they do that first bit, that will worry Leinster. Definitely, that will worry Leinster. And then now what you're doing is you're stressing Leinster and you're going to them and saying, okay, now you have to go deep to win this game. Now, we know they can do it, but that's for Munster. If they get to that point, they've won, they've at least shown up and they've at least won that part of it.
And there was a brilliant atmosphere in the Aviva the last time these two sides met. So call it now, lads. Who will we see in the URC final, John?
Oh, I'd love to say Connacht. And part of me desperately wants them to just back up that performance in Belfast. I suppose you common sense would tell you it'll be the Stormers, and the game in the Aviva is, I think it'll be very, very close for all the reasons.
What does common sense say about Munster Leinster?
Common sense.
Can't call this one. Genuinely, this is as close a game it's been.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Munster pack, that settled pack that have played well together. I know Tyke Byrne is back in. There is Peter O'Mahony fully fit. You'd like to think that he is, based on playing. And then you look at kind of Leinster's backline. You look at Munster's backline, the accommodation they've had to make in the absence of players. So there are a few unknowns in there in terms of how the game will take shape, and I think it's very, very tight. I agree with Gordon's point earlier on about the fact that Munster have I know Keith Earls is back in as well. They have a slightly more settled side in recent times, and Leinster have kind of shaken up their selection again this week. I think it could be a 1-score game.
Oh, it's
with Leinster, Munster.
No, I'm going to go Munster.
Munster Connacht final.
Munster Connacht final, yeah.
Gordon?
Yeah. I'm just trying to think where that's going to take place. That's going to be at Dublin Park, actually. Yeah.
Stormers, like I said, I think Connacht, you can't play attacking money rugby for 80 minutes. Be great if you could, but you can't. And their lack of tactical kicking and generally match smarts, I think it's going to ultimately undo them. So I think Stormers definitely for the final. And I just wonder, are we guilty of trying to find a reason for Leinster to lose? Or we've sometimes you go, oh, well, these are all the reasons Leinster won't win, but then you just forget that.
Then they do what they did against Toulouse.
Yeah, but winning, it's a habit. It's in there. Like if you're
they do have the break glass in case of emergency players on the bench as well.
Yeah, they have a much stronger bench really when you look at it than Munster.
Yeah, they have that kind of. I'm talking myself out of this again now, but yes, I would say.
You've already committed.
Come on, rescue me before I suggest that the Sharks are going to win the match in the Aviva tomorrow.
I think it would be you'll need Munster would have to be at their best. Do you know what? If Munster had a full deck, you would this would be a very different conversation with the team.
Yes, I think definitely.
The players that they missed out, that are missing out, hurt Munster way more than the rotation that Leinster are putting in. So I fully agree with John, though. It's a 1-score game. It's not going to be, there won't be any break glass. you know, in case of emergency, it'll be, well, they'll only break glass in case of absolute
necessity. Yeah,
necessity. So yeah, I think it, like, Leinster will be there, but I really do expect a big performance from Munster.
So you're thinking Leinster Stormers?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
wow.